You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Glad to have you with us here. Thanks for bearing with us through the changes. We're making some more changes. You're going to see a lot more coming up here on the Doug Collins podcast, being able to get the show in some different platforms, different locations. Glad to have you being a part of it. As we get started today, though, we're going to get started into really Chip's with us today. James with us today. James will be back, but Chip's with us. We're going to talk politics, and really we're under 3 weeks now, Chip, in the election. Things are going. I'm going to start off with a premise today, Chip, and let's talk about this premise. And the premise is, I believe, and I'll just throw this out there. I believe that this is a 1980, 1992, and in some ways a 2016 election. And let me tell you what I mean by that, and then we'll talk about it. That for all the early voting, for everything, nowadays we have early voting. In those earlier elections, not near as much as we have today. So, but there's a difference. The early votes today are all decided voters. This is not, nobody's going to the poll, rushing to the poll with an undecided to sit there in the booth for 5 minutes trying to figure out who they're going to vote for. In 80 and 92 and a little bit of 2016, you had it come down to the last week, even the last weekend in 1980, with Reagan over Carter and then with Clinton over Bush. Both of those elections, if you go back historically and look at the polling, they swung that last week, roughly. 2016, very similar with Clinton and Trump, with most people still thinking Trump was going to lose badly up until the night of the election. So it swung. I see a lot of that in this, and I see it in a couple reasons. Number one, you have two candidates that people aren't comfortable with for various reasons. Reagan, it's crazy. The same things were said about Reagan are the same things said about Trump. He'll get us in a war. He's going to give tax breaks to the rich. It's just all this kind of stuff. Clinton, sort of the opposite, but nobody knew Clinton, and they were worried about his affairs. They were worried about other things, but they couldn't get – but Bush never could connect with them. And, and the no promise on taxes came back up and everything. 2016, Clinton, Trump, same thing. What do you think is going to cause either that theory is completely wrong, or if it has some scintilla of right to it, what is the gut of these voters in this last, say, 18 days here?
No, I think there's a lot of accuracy to that, Doug, and I think it comes down to. This election basically comes down to one thing, and that is I think Donald Trump. I've said for the longest time I think this race is a coin flip. I now no longer believe it's a coin flip. I believe that the chances of Donald Trump winning over the last 3 weeks are exponentially better now than his opponent, and I think it comes down to one thing, Doug, and that is. Were you better off under the policies of Donald Trump when he was president, or are you better off under the policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? And I think where this election is breaking, and you'd said it, you'd kind of in a roundabout way said it, with kind of starting this discussion, and that is, people might not like Trump's personality. They might not like some of his bravado. They might not like some of his tweets. But you know what? They feel like he ran this country better than the one that's there now. Yeah. And, as complicated as these elections are, at the end of the day, I think this election might be decided on a pretty simple issue, and that is, who do you think can run the country better? And I just think he's going to have an edge on that. And I think that's showing in some of the polling that we've seen over the last 3 weeks.
I spoke with a pollster this morning before we taped the show, and the interesting comment was about Georgia, and we'll just take one of the swing states. Georgia, in particular, was that everything in Georgia seems to be pointing now toward a clear, at least at this second. And I think this is good and bad, at least toward a clear trend toward Trump. I mean, it's getting outside the margin of error. I mean, Quinnipiac puts the poll out at 7. There's no way it's at 7. 3, 4, easy. I think that's an understandable, because you're now starting to get it. And Chip, we've talked about this before on the podcast before. There are polls and then there are polls. They're the public-facing polls that the media pays for or that think tanks pay for, and typically have a bias to them or have an agenda with them. And then you have what you and I both know of as the paid polls, the ones that the professional pollsters do for campaigns or do for organizations that never really see the light of day. Those are the ones that need to be dead on, because if they're not, those pollsters aren't get hired in the next cycle. And they're sort of showing this same thing, especially in Georgia. And they're also showing this, and I'd love to get your take on this, that we've not seen this as much before, that Trump is outperforming Senate candidates in several of the states. And that's been an interesting turn that, you know, people have always said it's the others are outperforming Trump. And that's not the way it is in Arizona, Ohio even a little bit, Pennsylvania definitely, and even Michigan a little bit with Mike Rogers.
And Nevada.
In Nevada, very much so in Nevada. I forgot Nevada. Yeah.
And look, I mean, I know we were talking about Senate candidates, but I mean, he's likely going to outperform Mark Robinson in North Carolina by 15, 18 points, right? So, yeah, I just, you know, I feel as good about it. Of course, that's dangerous. I don't usually ever feel good about elections, you know, but I do. I would be very surprised if he doesn't win Georgia. I don't know that I'd be shocked, because I don't know that anything shocks me in today's lexicon of politics, but be very surprised if he doesn't win Georgia. I just think, you know, I also think, Doug, too, and you know, I've talked about it ad nauseum, you know, one of the things that worked against us in 2020 was complacency. It had been the late 90s until the Democrats won a meaningful statewide race. Right. So, you know, we had 20 years of winning these races when, you know, we knew that the environment was changing over time, and we had still won a lot of these races. And so, you know, there was just a segment of voters that didn't believe us when we said, hey, you got to go out to the polls because we could lose this race. And now they believe us, because, you know, that same year we lost the presidential race. We got 2 U.S. senators out of it. You know,
Georgia's been here, and that's what has fueled the are we purple or are we changing state. But yet, when you look down ballot, past those marquee kind of things, everything else is the same, solid. For those of you who are waiting for a Cree visitation, we had a Cree visitation there for everybody that wanted to just has mentioned Cree coming out. But the other issue here, though, Chip, and I'm seeing this, is the Georgia vote in particular, and I saw the data file breakdown yesterday. I was pretty amazed that the data file breakdown almost showed it an even split.
Oh, that's so huge for us, because we don't win the first 2 weeks of early voting. We usually win the last week of early voting substantially, and historically, you know, that's when the highest numbers of early voters are there. And so, yeah, the fact that it was even split, that's bad news. I mean, that is bad news for Democrats. They didn't.
This is interesting, and let's talk about this, because these are the first two, comes out of the first day and a half of actual early vote, in-person early voting in Georgia. Republicans took 144,000 of these are modeled, by the way, folks. If you're wondering about what we're saying, and we're not saying that these are actual votes, but this is how they voted in the past. They voted in Republican precinct, party, Republican primaries, that kind of. That's how it's modeled. 40. It's basically 44-45. It's high. But curious to me was 34,000 unmodeled votes, Chip. 34,000 unmodeled votes. That's 10% of all the votes that's been cast. What do you make of that? I don't think we've seen that number before.
No, it's hard to tell. You know, it's I mean, it's kind of like the voter registration numbers. When we don't register under party affiliation in Georgia, and so when we're looking at voter registration numbers, we have to extrapolate, variables. And in the past, those variables are usually easier to decipher when you look at race, right? And you look at in the past, we've used the 10% number for African American vote that Republicans get, and that's going to be higher this time, because we know that African American men are supporting Donald Trump at an unprecedented number. Numbers that we haven't seen, as high as 22%. I mean, for the layman out there that doesn't understand, that's a huge anomaly. And while he's still only getting 8% of African American women, you average that together, and that's a lot more than 10% on the whole. And so I don't know. It's hard to tell what to read into that. But I'm used to early voting getting better for us over time. If early voting gets better for us, because we don't have to win early voting to win the state. He will win election day voting. He won election day voting in 2016, won election day voting in 2020. The question is, what percentage of total turnout will be, election day voting? It'll be certainly much larger than it was in 2020, because that was a COVID year, and we only had 19% of the electorate show up on election day. I think it's likely going to be in the 40% range. And that's twice as much as it was in 2020. We only lost by 11,000 votes, so I feel good about it.
Yeah. Well, to the worrisome turn, and that's Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania, early voting in Pennsylvania, mail-in balloting is one of the few states. Mail-in balloting is up over 2020. Got that word in, was listening and hearing that it's actually up.
That is very concerning if that's true.
Yes. And so those numbers are high. They've had, I want to say they've already had like 200 and something thousand mail-ins already. So, that's a big number. And again, Republicans had worked on that up there. So there may be some reflective, our instinct is to say that's all Democrat votes. But, there may be some offset there. I'd love to see, and again, they do party affiliation up there, so it will be interesting to that. We'll get a pretty good breakdown on where that's happening. But from what I've seen in New York and also in Michigan, some other, right now there has been the party. I've seen the breakdown, and the breakdowns are not. They're heavily Democratic. So,
yeah, if it's only 200,000, that doesn't. I mean, I haven't really studied the.
That's already turned in, is my understanding.
Okay, not out. Okay.
And again, those numbers, are always. I hadn't. You float, you see, and and goes in. But I think it is coming down to the tightness of this campaign. I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see something that nobody would have predicted early on. I think you're going to see Trump win states that Trump winning a state and the Senate losing the state. I think you'll see that. I think, unfortunately, right now it looks like Nevada is definitely one of those states. I think Trump could win Nevada.
Arizona's one of those states.
Arizona's one of those states as well. They could win both those states, and the Senate candidates lose. Now, there has been movement. Here's the more surprising number. If Eric Hudvey in Wisconsin actually pulls that off, which right now nobody would have put this race within a 1 or 2 point or dead even race, and which is what it is at this second from basically any polling that you're seeing, even private polling. Do you see a scenario where Hudvey could win Wisconsin and Trump doesn't?
First of all, I've always been bullish on Eric Hobby. I've thought he was a really good candidate, and it's not a surprise to me that he's doing really well in Wisconsin, and that the polls are reflective of that. The only way that's possible is if the seat is so close and the race is so close that it's within a half point either way. I don't see, I really don't see Donald Trump and Eric Hobby being outside of 1 to 1.2 points from each other. I mean, that's 1 out of every 100 votes splitting. That's probably about right. And so I think it's unlikely, but man, if it's, if it is as close as it looks, anything's possible. And, but remember Trump doesn't need to win Wisconsin if he can win Pennsylvania and Georgia. Right. I think he's going to win Georgia and Arizona. And so I really do. I really think this presidential race comes down to the 20 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. And we're going to know that, knock on wood, I hope we're going to know that. It's obviously an Eastern time zone state. And so, we should have a pretty good idea on where Pennsylvania is going. And Pennsylvania would be a good bellwether. If Trump looks like he's winning Pennsylvania, he's not going to lose Georgia. He's not going to lose Arizona. And if he flips those 3 states, that puts him at 270, and he'll be the next president.
Yeah. What about North Carolina was always sort of a, bluish state, however you want to look at it, and not bluish, but purple, and that similar to Georgia in some ways. But yet they've actually elected a lot of Democrat officials, state Democrat officials, where Georgia has not. I put North Carolina further in the purple, much further in the purple than Georgia is.
Yes.
And is the governor's race there going to? That's going to be the question. The disaster in Western North Carolina, which is a heavily Republican area, and combined with the very frustrating race that appears to have developed in the governor's race, is that putting North Carolina in Harris's camp?
I don't think it is, Doug. It's Trump that has the coattails because he's on the top of the ballot, and the tails go, as you know, they go down ballot, not up ballot usually, and I just can't see, especially with momentum where it is now, because Trump has momentum, she doesn't, and he didn't need momentum to win states like North Carolina. I don't think the federal government's slow response to what happened up there after Hurricane Helene came in is going to be very helpful to Kamala Harris. And so, yeah, look, they're not happy with their nominee for governor. I get that. It is what it is. Everybody realized, a few weeks back, there was just nothing that we could do about that. And, and as a result, though, I think because Donald Trump will win North Carolina, Mark Robinson will lose North Carolina by not as big of a margin as people think, because I do think Trump, being on the ballot will help him. He'll still lose. He still fall up short, but he's not going to lose by the historic margins that it looks like polling might be right now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Look, I think everybody's agreed at this point, barring something just completely unforeseen, the Senate flips. It'll be Republican, and the House is still very much in play. And that's going to be an interesting time, probably something you and I will talk about maybe after the election when that actually happens. Because you're throwing the House, there's just so much leadership implications there. There's so much, policy indications. Trump wins, they lose the House. Could it look like 2019 again when I was there and we had to deal with impeachment starting almost day one? Because I just don't see how Hakeem Jeffries, if he becomes speaker, can get away with not impeaching Donald Trump. I just don't see it. And although he's going to be there for 4 years and it's going to be nothing they can do about it, would Hakeem rise above that temptation? I'm not sure he can because they want to win 2020 and get the Senate back.
No, I'm not so sure he can either, but watch what happens if Donald Trump wins this election, as I believe now he's going to do. Watch the Democrats, because if he wins this election, it's going to be close in Pennsylvania. It'll probably be, I don't think it's going to be as close in Georgia as Arizona, but, we'll see. But watch the Democrats go ballistic about something on the voting systems, or, they're going to do a 180, and they're going to behave the way they accused us of behaving 4 years ago, and I'm going to get my popcorn and sit back and watch it.
Remember, they set the standard in 2004 and 2016, so they were the original, they were the OGs in this thing. As it goes, I can't let go of the political before we bring James in, though, without seeing one of Georgia's favorite new Democratic sons this week on the platform with Vice President Harris in Pennsylvania.
Which one was that?
Jeff Duncan. Country over party rally in Pennsylvania, and there was Jeff Duncan.
I love it. When I worked for Lynn Westmoreland, he always had a saying that, if you have a shovel and you're digging a hole, you should put the shovel down. Yeah. And with Jeff Duncan, he would say, he's put the shovel down, but now he's in a backhoe.
Exactly.
And basically, for those of you that don't know what a backhoe is, that can dig a much deeper hole than a shovel can. And I love it. I love seeing it. I love watching it. It's very entertaining for me. It's very justifying to me. It's very liberating, and I just think that he was on CNN last night with Anderson Cooper, and he was in Pennsylvania, and I just can't. I don't know exactly how I will react. I mean, literally, but here's the irony. Here's the irony of it, Doug. He is former lieutenant governor in Georgia, and they're not using him to campaign in Georgia.
Exactly.
In the
He
campaign
hadn't made almost any appearance in Georgia, except maybe smaller appearances.
in Pennsylvania, where nobody knows who the hell he is, and so I love it because if Trump does win Pennsylvania, that means that Jeff didn't do enough White Dudes for Harris events in Pennsylvania, and I just love it.
If he could actually bring on votes, let's see him do an event at Reed's Barn up in Forsyth County for Harris.
I don't know that would go real well.
I don't think that'd work real well. I don't think it wouldn't be a very good attendance. All right, but folks, we'll keep it up for the next few weeks, knowing everything is going on here on the political side. We're going to bring James in, getting some of our football analysis and our life analysis here. By the way, we have Pandas again in D.C. Pandas are back. One of our first Friday Finest shows was dealing with the absence of pandas, but we now have 2 pandas back, I think it is, or 4. Is it 2 or 4?
That I don't know. I just know the lack of zoo stories that we've had on this program in the last few months has been abysmal, and we apologize. Yeah. We are going to bring zoo stories back to Friday's Finest as much as possible.
Yeah, we're missing zoo stories. We got pandas coming back. The Atlanta had a going away party for our panda about a month ago, I think it was, and so now we're moving along as we go through that. But now James, who is traveling around the world, is in San Diego, home of the quote world famous San Diego Zoo.
At this very moment, I am in New Jersey because I had to come back for a wedding. Wait, I am leaving tonight to go back to San Diego, and I don't know if we talked about this. But I'm a pretty friendly guy, yeah?
Yeah.
So I meet people constantly. And I met Vikings fans in San Diego while I was at a Padres bar while we were watching them play great, and I'm pretty pissed they didn't win now as a Mets fan. We met them, and the guy was like, hey, there's another Vikings fan right behind you. Started talking to that guy. Turns out there's a Vikings bar in San Diego. 9 a.m. you got to get there, so I will be drunk by 11.
They have all those special blue signs out front, Chip, where they park.
Yeah, they're right.
Here's what I heard, though, and I don't know how true this is. The Vikings bar is right here, and there is a Green Bay Packers bar across the street.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like if I get enough booze in me, I'll go fight some Packers fans. And I think that'll be a good time. You guys might be like, hey, James, you can't get arrested before we do the next show, but I'm gonna. So it's going to be a good time. I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, well, remember, I am not bar certified in California, so we'll have to.
Yeah, but whoa. The reason I do this show is because you have connections. That's the whole point of this.
Well, look, hey, though, you better behave, though, because if you don't behave, you're not going to get to go to the Breeders' Cup.
Oh, that's right. All right, I got to be good. You know what? I apologize.
I
take it back. I'm going to be smart about
Chip
this.
is just like parenting. You just remind them of the consequences.
Well, he doesn't actually have to behave, but if he's not going to behave, you better make sure there's not a person behind him with a camera, like that Baltimore Ravens fan after the.
Oh my God, these people are. He just cold clocked somebody for
just because he has his jersey on.
What makes people think that this is okay? When did this become okay?
All jokes aside, right? Like, I'm not going to go fight a Packers fan unless they throw a punch at me first, let's be honest. Those people are Wisconsin strong, and I am not that strong. But, like, all jokes aside, like, what happened to you? Apparently he had a camera and said, I just want to go punch it was a Bengals fan, right? I think it was like an unsuspecting Bengals.
Redskins.
Sorry, so it was a Commanders fan.
Commanders.
So it was a Commanders fan, and he just cold clocked him. Like, no reason whatsoever. I can't imagine being that angry about something. I love the Vikings.
And they won!
And they won. And they won. They were like, they saw Jaden Daniels, and they're like, there'll never be another Lamar, and then punch the guy in the face. Like, that's pretty much how I'm thinking about it. I don't get it. I just don't understand. What's going on in your life?
Well, we can't avoid this one because this one is, I mean, you know, the hype machine for college football, which by the way is skyrocketing.
It's insane.
And everybody but CBS and really Fox is benefiting from this. CBS, though, can you imagine, Chip? You're a CBS executive. In the last few weeks, you're normally what would have been your 3:30 premier Saturday game. You're going to get $1 million ads. You've been showing Illinois versus Wisconsin, Northwestern, instead of Alabama, Georgia, Texas. I mean, 1 and 2 teams.
Georgia, Texas is this weekend, yeah?
Georgia, Texas is this weekend.
All right. How do we feel about this one, Doug? Okay, first of all, that's not allowed anymore. 15-yard penalty on Doug.
Horns down. No, look, I think, all fairness, it's going to be a tough game. And if Georgia, here's my thing. I'm going to prepare, and you know my bias here, but it's fine. But I'm going to be honest. If Georgia shows up and plays like they've played the last few weeks, and Texas is really real, then it's going to be a long day for Georgia. Now,
yes.
The question, though, is Texas Alabama? Is Texas a Ohio State? Is Texas
their schedule hasn't been tough?
It hasn't
so far,
been.
Texas,
I mean, you got
right?
Oklahoma's one of their tough ones. What was LSU? And it was USC. It was who did they play the very first? Was it?
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up now. I mean,
again, I'm not trying to diminish what they're doing. I mean, look, Sarkisian, to the surprise of everybody, has raised a good football program out there again. They paid a lot of money for it.
They certainly did.
But the question is,
Michigan at Michigan.
At Michigan. But we've all now seen Michigan is not Michigan. After they lost 22 players. So I mean, it's a legitimate question. I'm being honest about us. I don't think we've been playing our best ball by any stretch of the imagination.
I don't think you have either.
And but I'm just not sure how much Texas has played.
Also,
I'd love to have seen a Texas-Alabama before we played them. That would have been interesting.
Quick question, because I've been not paying attention as much. Is Quinn Ewers back yet, or is it still Art?
He's back.
Okay.
He came back last week. He looked okay.
Is it me or do you? Okay, because I watched some of the Arch games because obviously I was curious. Do you think it was smart for them to go back to you? I mean, I know Ewers is going to be a top 5 pick this year coming out of the draft. Let's be honest. Anybody who can play quarterback competently is going to be in the
I think they had to get him back last week, Chip. What do you think? I think they had to get him back last week because they did not want to put Arch in this game with Georgia.
No. So we'd all find out,
Yeah. I think I think Arch is going to be probably a really good college quarterback, but.
Well, you also needed Ewers to dust the cobwebs off. It had been 4 weeks since he had seen.
Right, exactly. You ain't going to throw him in versus Georgia just immediately. That would be like,
they're both really good quarterbacks. They're probably 2 of the best 5 quarterbacks in the country. So it's like they have an embarrassment of riches there at the quarterback position.
So who do you think?
The good thing is Quinn has saw defenses, whereas Arch has not.
Right.
Arch has had to do it in practice squad.
Right. Yeah, Arch is not going to. I mean, you're never ready for a Georgia or an Alabama defense up front. You're just not. You can't. You could prepare for years. You're not going to just be ready for that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a throw into the fire situation. I do have a question though, because who do you think goes first in the draft? And I know this is kind of off topic. Ewers or Shedeur?
I think Beck may go before all 3.
You think so? See, I don't know. I think you're gonna. I think Ewers.
The only reason I say that is not because I'm a Georgia fan. The only reason I say it is Beck is raised in a more NFL scheme offense.
See,
Shedeur is off the cuff.
Well, right, but
and
so is
Ewers
Jaden
as
Daniels.
well. Now, granted, Ewers is as well. I'm not going to deny Ewers as well. But Shedeur, you're going to have a Ravens team or somebody else that takes Shedeur early.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Is like I think people are seeing, like especially with Jaden Daniels, who's playing like a Lamar Jackson right now, or doing his best impression of it. I think they're going to see that, and I think, by the way, the Caleb experiment is working, Doug.
It took a while.
It took a minute, but it's working, and I hate every bit of it now. I regret saying that it was going to work because
that's tough against Jacksonville.
Okay. All right. You know what? We're not going to let you slander Caleb today. It's not happening today. No, but I was curious.
Anthony Richardson in?
Anthony Richardson's still down. All right. Also, it is good to see Joey Flack back in a uniform, just absolutely balling.
Okay, wait. This has brought us though to the ultimate thing. The absolute. I mean, dumpster fire is description is an embarrassment to a dumpster fire to describe dumpster fire in Cleveland. The offensive line literally just walks around. They don't even go help Watson up. They the defense back. I think I don't think they do want him hurt. I don't believe that.
No, they just want him out of that game.
They want him out of the game.
Let's be very honest, guys. Let's be real honest about this. I'm a Kevin Stefanski fan. He was with the Vikings for years. I thought he did great work. He comes to Cleveland, turns that team around immediately. But let's be real honest. Deshaun Watson is not only not the player he was, but he is the worst quarterback currently starting. Maybe outside of... No, you know what? It's him. It has to be him because he has too much talent around him.
Have y'all seen the poll, the statistic the other day that said since 2020 or 2019 when he came, basically going back several years before he came to the league from that his numbers out of the 600 and something quarterbacks that were eligible for ratings, it was like 598 of these quarterbacks. He was consistently in like 8 from the bottom. Rating, efficient, everything. And look, I've known this kid since this guy since he was 7 years old. Okay, he changed when he got to the pros and signed a bigger contract. He changed in his focus. We know all the off-field stuff. We know all the other, which is again, agree, disagree, whatever. But at a certain point in time, when you're spending more time modeling in Europe with your girlfriend and putting it on Instagram than you are undoubtedly playing football back in Cleveland, it's going to show up. It's like a golfer. It brings us up back to here's a great segue. You'll love this. About like a horse racing, but also we haven't taught live and PGA in a while.
Good. No.
Talk about now. But I think Deshaun Watson and some of these other folks who don't play a lot. This is what it's the live factor now. Look at how many folks who took the money and went to live, and I don't care about the World Golf Ranking. Just watch them play, and then watch it when they come back in with the PGA players. There's a difference, and it didn't show up as much in the first year, but it definitely showed up this year.
100%.
Except Kepler.
Chip, I don't know about you, and I don't know about you guys, to be honest, but like if you're the Cleveland owner, right? You have to I know I've never been in a business where I had to cut my losses, but this isn't even up for debate. If your team gives up, your best wide receiver is begging to get out of town, and you're going to bring Nick Chubb back, who's coming back very soon, and you can't just give him Jameis. You have Jameis. It's one thing if you didn't have anybody, but you got Jameis back there, and that kid loves football. He loves to play football. Give him a shot. Who cares? Your season is over. You're not winning that division.
No, it's if you're an owner and not a fan, and even though the owner's I'm sure a fan as well, but if you're an owner, I would imagine it has got to be really hard to cut ties with a guy that you gave $230 million in guaranteed money to, and he's not giving you anything in return on the investment.
Zero.
Nothing. And so you got to, they got to keep saying, he's got to get better. He's got to get better. And he's not getting better. He is not getting better. And, it's just, Doug's right. It's absolute a dumpster fire of monumental proportions. And it's actually tough to watch because I like Deshaun Watson. I've always been a fan of his and liked what he did at Clemson and beat Alabama once, I think. And that was, Trevor Lawrence beat Alabama twice. And I love any quarterback that beat Alabama when they were in college. There's not a whole lot of them. You can name them on one hand, but, at some point in time, he's going to have to cut bait. But I understand why he wants to keep giving it a chance because he's got so much invested. It's like the strips are in the middle, and he's still waiting on the dealer to turn over the turn card and the river card, and the dealer's getting old, sitting at the table waiting to turn those cards over.
Yeah, they still owe. I think somebody reported yesterday they would still owe him $100 million right now.
That's
They let him go.
that just doesn't make any
$100
sense. What are we doing?
Yeah.
We got to.
Well,
They're going to
but
start making
here's the
contracts so
question.
they can get out of this stuff.
Real quick roundabout. Let's just say they tried to get rid of him today, or they cut him today. Does anybody pick him up?
No, somebody's going to pick them up. People are very dumb, but if it's going to be anybody,
But wait a
I
second.
don't think anybody. I think he becomes another Cam Newton.
Somebody up off of waivers, then you assume the contract, right?
It depends. Let's just
oh,
okay.
you mean he? Wait. If they release him and they pick him up off waivers, they take his contract.
Yeah, so
Cleveland doesn't pay that?
waivers and be a free agent.
Yeah. Well, let's
Oh,
just,
no,
let's
no
just-
one
I'm
pick
gonna-
him up
I'm
for
gonna
the
take it a different-
contract, no.
Let's just say that he got fully paid out today. Okay.
So he's fully paid out. Who takes it?
And now he's a free agent with a fully paid out contract. Nobody assumes debt or anything else. I think he becomes like Cam Newton did in his later years, Kaepernick in a way. I just don't think anybody pick him up. I just really don't.
I
mean,
I want to say no, but there's always some dummy that thinks they can fix everybody. I don't know who that is right now in the league. I'm just saying.
Well, but you pick him up as a backup.
If you can pick him up for almost nothing, I
Yeah.
feel like yes, pick him up as a backup.
which probably not gonna
But
happen.
those problems that follow, like there's another 20 some odd people go or whatever going after. Like it's not worth it. But there is always someone who's like, yeah, no, I could make him a good quarterback again. You're like, okay.
The best redemption story. The best, and from one of our favorite guests, Shannon Gailey, out of his mouth, the best thing that ever happened, and the prediction that played true was the best thing that ever happened to Baker Mayfield is getting out of Cleveland.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam Darnold got out of Carolina and then ended up with an organization like San Francisco that might have instilled a little confidence in him.
The best thing that ever happened to Bo Nix was getting out of Auburn. I mean, it's
Yeah, sometimes it's just an organizational thing.
yeah.
I mean, we could go back and do this forever, but like, if a guy doesn't land where he lands, are they a Hall of Famer? Like that's how some talent, and then they end up not even being a Pro Bowler.
The interesting question right now, and it's sort of funny. I heard somebody say this, that he's not a top tier quarterback. Talking about Mayfield, but yet Mayfield
He is
the
right
top
now.
5 of all the stats. And why does Baker Mayfield still get overlooked by every discussion of good quarterbacking in the NFL right now?
It's the Geno Smith thing. It's the same thing that haunts every quarterback. If you've played bad in the past in any situation, and for some reason nobody is accounting for the fact that Baker Mayfield was playing on half a body for the last year in Cleveland, but it just when you look that bad to people and you start throwing 4 picks in a game and this, that, and the other, that is what always sticks. The reason we love Michael Jordan so much is because the stuff that sticks with us is the fadeaway jumpers and the game winners. The problem is with Baker and someone like Geno Smith and someone like Sam Darnold is the only thing we're thinking of is I'm seeing ghosts or I just do 3 picks against whoever, and that'll always stick with us. So that is how it's always going to be. But to me, like Baker Mayfield just fits a great system right now.
Well, and the reason he's not getting respect too is he's been with 4 teams in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
So he's a journeyman. You know, I mean, Cleveland, Carolina, the Rams, and now Tampa. I mean, he's a journeyman, and we don't expect this out of journeymen. They don't get the respect that
The Kurt
Cleveland
Warner
gets.
syndrome.
Well, I guess I can't remember also the last time there were 3 or 4 quarterbacks that looked really awful for their career and are now playing good football in a single season. And obviously I'm referring to Darnold, Baker, and Geno. And Geno's iffy sometimes, but Geno still plays pretty well. Look at Joe Flacco. He was dead in the water. No one wanted him. And he's gotten older. I'm pretty sure he's gotten better at football, which seems impossible because he's like 1,000 years old.
But he thinks better. And look, it just goes back to the fact that a quarterback is thinking, and a quarterback you need the decision-making capability. As long as you can maintain a above average physical capability, you can still throw the ball, you can make that. As long as your arm's still there and you can move a little bit, I think the mental aspect of quarterback for some like Flacco and some of these others, it plays well in their older age, and they're not an offensive lineman, they're not a running back, and they can
Right, and he's still got a cannon, so it doesn't matter. Like he's still got.
Yeah, and in some ways too, he's playing with house money because there's so many people that gave up on this guy. So now all of a sudden he's playing with no expectations, and so you know
Won the Super Bowl.
he's in a great spot. Yeah,
You know,
I
it's
mean, that
amazing.
was 12 years ago. If you want to feel old right now.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But you know, like I said, it's going to be interesting here. Turning our attention to back to college football for a second. It's getting interesting now in who's winning, who's losing. First off, we got to give props as much as this pains me. Army and Navy are both ranked for the first time together since the 60s. And conceivably, if you look at their schedules,
Yes, I saw this.
worst they could come into that game at the end of the year is with one loss each. I mean, Notre Dame is on both. And again, I'm trying to refrain from a Notre Dame rant here. Why? And never mind. Notre Dame is.
We could do a separate show. We can record
they're
after this.
Division
We can
1A.
just talk about
and they
Notre
keep getting
Dame.
put in as top 5. Give me a freaking break.
Who?
Okay, Notre Dame.
They're top 5. You just said.
They get well if you listen to every. Well, we got to think about Notre Dame. No, you don't
No,
have to
we
think
don't.
about Notre Dame.
They choose not to be in a division.
They play
choose
Army,
that.
Navy. They play all these other games, and nobody ever holds them accountable for it. But anyway, to not take anything away from Army and Navy, they could both conceivably beat Notre Dame, which I think would be classic.
So good.
And be
Yes.
unbeaten going into the game at the end of the year. That would be really cool. But do you see a difference? And I don't mean this in a way that's overt. But have we noticed a difference in coaching of the top teams, given the fact that most of the top 5 to 6 could be in the playoffs with 1 or 2 losses? Have we noticed a lack of urgency? And I'm going to think in particular, DeBoer at Alabama, Kirby at Georgia, Oregon, Texas, some of the Ohio State, the Brian Day, or is it just that there's not the hype anymore. There's not the tragedy when they lose.
Every game's not life or death. It's as simple as that now.
and I love that. By the way, I mean a lot of people have been critical of the expanded playoff because of that. You're going to play 12 games during the season. Not every one of those 12 games are you going to play well. And you can't. You're not judging under that construct. You're not judging the equity of the conferences, I don't think, because especially now, I mean, look at the SEC with gaining Oklahoma and Texas. I mean, come on, who's going to run the gauntlet there? It's just not realistic anymore. And so I actually love the expanded playoffs, and I don't think it's diminished the regular season. Certainly it's not, Doug has said maybe the urgency, but I don't think it's diminished the regular season at all. I think college football is as exciting as it's ever been.
I think you're right, but I also think this is what it really gives us. So when you go to the NFL playoffs or you go and do baseball or basketball, right? You get the best players a majority of the time, right?
Not in baseball.
Well, okay, yeah, in baseball, all right, because the Mets are doing fine. Everything's going to be fine if we're down 2-1, 1-2.
Only because it's the Mets and not the Marlins.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is right now, if you look at the AP, right, teams that are just outside is someone like Boise State. Boise State could possibly sneak in if they were to run the table the rest of the way or whatever, right? That kid, I'm blanking on his name right now.
Ashton Genty.
Don't you want to see him in the playoffs, right? And I think that is another motive in the 12-team playoff is we're not just going to see 3 guys that we like. We're going to see possibly 12 to 15 guys that we really like, and they might be a game changer for one single game to get you into the next round.
Yeah, I
think that's going to make this more fun.
I thought it was interesting. Ohio State lost to Oregon last week and only dropped to 4. I thought that was
yeah.
I think it shows a Big Ten bias a little bit.
Well, there's always listen. They're not stupid. Those teams need to get in, otherwise, no one's going to watch.
Well, yeah, but this brings up a question. Now we used to think it was a one-loss, scenario. You don't make the 14 playoff. You don't win the championship.
If you lose 3 games, you shouldn't be in it. That's my opinion.
That's going to be the question. What about 2s? Okay, I'll throw a scenario out here. Alabama has a terrible loss. Okay, the Vanderbilt loss for them is a bad loss. Okay,
Correct.
if you compare the loss Georgia coming back and almost winning against Alabama and and losing there at the last second. I mean, that's a loss that you look at Oregon, Ohio State. Okay, same kind of deal. The loss Alabama has with Vanderbilt's a different level. But I'll give it this. Let's just say the question runs out. Let's say Texas wins this weekend. You got a 2-loss Georgia team that then doesn't lose a game the rest of the year, beats Tennessee, beats Ole Miss, beats everybody else, goes into the end of the year 10-2. Do they make the playoffs?
It depends on if they beat Tennessee and they beat other big teams.
They run the rest of the league 10-2.
All right, so
lose
if they lose
lose
that loss to
Alabama,
Vanderbilt,
they lose to Alabama and Texas.
all right, but you got to look at who's under them, right? So we're talking about teams like Boise State, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Clemson. Like, I don't know.
I think Clemson will lose again. I think Clemson will have 2 losses as well.
Yeah.
I look at I would want to see someone like Indiana sneak in and a Boise State or a I like that. I don't know. I don't know if you can kick Alabama out if they didn't do it last year.
I don't see how you. I don't think you. I think Texas. I think if it goes to the end of the year as is, Alabama 1 loss, Texas say they run the table, and Georgia
100%.
2 loss. Alabama, Texas are in. That's a given because they're going to be in the
100%.
SEC championship game. The question is, will they pull Georgia in, or 2 loss, or let's just say Ohio State loses a second one. Just say Michigan. Do they?
Well, actually, they lose to Michigan this year. They're not.
I'm not putting any stock on Indiana or any of these other teams right now. There's no comparison between the schedules. There's no comparison.
No, that's totally fair.
No comparison between the schedules.
I'm just saying, if you're looking at if Alabama has 2 losses, even though one of them is Vanderbilt, they have to get in. There's no way they
They
don't.
would be better than a 1-loss Indiana.
Oh no, they'd be Alabama with 5 losses is better than any Indiana team. That's just talent alone. You know, that's not really up for debate.
By the way, we haven't had a chance to talk about this since the Vandy. We didn't do this last week, but after the Vandy loss, there was an absolute epic meltdown on the Paul Feinbaum show. Legend was just classic. I mean, classic. Legend. And it just goes to show you that college football in the South is different. Okay? It just is. And Auburn fans, everybody could sympathize with Legend. Coming home and finding your wife in bed with another woman. I may take you back, but I ain't trusting you again.
He said, I might stay with it. We might stay together for the kids, but I'm never going to trust her again. The legend, Kip Keefer has back when you had the podcast with Salem, Doug, Kip had stepped in a couple times and guest hosted. And Kip and Legend are really tight. And they're really tight because Kip is the executive director of the Alabama Racing Commission, which is they have dog races, greyhound races in Birmingham. And then you can simulcast bet in Birmingham too, and so he's the executive director of that. And he met him because he was a worker at the track, and he's like, and he had a couple people say, "Hey, I think that's Legend." This was like 8 years ago, and Kip went up and asked him, "Are you the Legend for the Paul Feinbaum show?" And then they've been best friends ever since. And so
They still have Victoryland down in Montgomery.
they do, but there's no racing there anymore. It's just like slot games, electronic games, and I think you can simulcast bet, as well. And so, yeah, man.
Vegas doesn't even do dogs. Some of them don't even do the dogs anymore.
Don't, but I had a chance to get in the Legend Cave before the season began, and it was 5 minutes. That's it. That's all you get in the Legend Cave. And I didn't get a whole lot of words in, and I talk a lot.
Does he do a podcast or something?
Well, I didn't do a podcast with him. I actually drove to Birmingham one day and did a college football preview show for the ABC affiliate with Kip and one of his hosts, and then afterwards, the Legend Cave is kind of a green screen behind that area, and it was something, man. It was like I said, I didn't get a whole lot in. It was 5 minutes of me kind of shaking my head and looking at Legend, and he's a showman. He's a showman. He loves to show, but he is. He is kind of out of central casting for what everybody thinks Alabama fans are. And there's a reason he's out of central casting, because he represents what every Alabama fan is.
And remember, and everybody forgets that Feinbaum show was the one, and what was it, 12, or when the guy called in and about Toomer's tree?
Updike.
Yeah, Updike, who actually spiked Toomer's tree and killed it. And,
He-
the Feinbaum show, you just don't say anything like it. I mean, it's just
Harvey Updike, and look, Harvey Updike was just a dumb Bama fan who had some DD 224 hanging around his barn, and he went up and then put it into the soil, and he literally killed
the Toomer tree.
100-year-old these oak trees, and they he was found guilty of it. I don't know that he ever served time in prison. But
Hey, didn't they take some of the genetic stuff out of that tree, and aren't they growing it again or something?
yeah, they are, but it takes a while, man. It takes a while, and they
James, see, this is the kind of stuff you don't get in pro football.
no.
No.
Yeah, you get this.
The only thing we got over here is Rutgers, and nobody cares about
Yeah,
that.
no,
That's
it is wild. But folks, this is why we got to do it.
Sorry, Doug. I was
I
going
think this is
like why he ended up doing that, and he took a deep breath and he said, "I guess I just have too much tide in me."
just too much time. Yeah, and he said he's got to do it. He said Paul, and his voice is cracking. James, if you've never seen this, you need to go back and look at it. His voice is cracking, and he said, "Paul, I know I shouldn't, but I just got to roll damn tide." I mean, I tell you what, if you want to get a gist of Alabama, Auburn. I mean, Georgia Tech is a pretty good series as well, but it's also lost a lot in the last 20 years. But the Alabama, Auburn, go to the SEC, go to the 30 for 30s, and there's one that's on that, and it plays a lot of that series. But the Alabama Auburn stuff it's a.
But I love that though.
That 30 for 30 is really, really good. Have you seen it, hadn't you, Chip?
Oh yeah, it's
I mean, it's really good, and it's very fair, really, to both Auburn and Alabama. It's not a Auburn thing. It's not an Alabama thing.
Not a bias.
It's just a thing, and it just goes. Hey, guys, before next week, let's look at real quickly. I want to do this pretty quickly. Go around the room. Jaden Daniels, we all talked about being Rookie of the Year. I feel anybody disagree, still Rookie of the Year about a quarter of the way through?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, he's got it sewn up.
Yeah.
For the most part. Caleb would have to go.
I will say Bo Nix is actually, I think, learning more than he ever thought he would learn, and next year could be an interesting year for Bo Nix. I think his second year, because he's proven he does that. It takes him a little while, but once he gets going.
Well, Sean Payton's a piece of garbage, so no. But we can
Okay,
get.
like I
We
said,
can
Sean Payton's not quarterbacking the
yeah, but he's coaching that team. That's all I'm saying. Continue.
Chip. they're unbeaten, and you can't even put him in the same screen with us. I mean, it's just,
I hate Sean Payton. Everything that man stands for. And if we need him,
the purple people eater is just going at it.
the purple people eaters.
you couldn't. Only way to put me in a bad mood is to have anyone associated with Sean Payton.
I heard he was looking to come be offensive coordinator in Minnesota.
I would literally become a Green Bay Packers fan tomorrow.
All right. Here be our closing question of the day. What would be your biggest surprise in the NFL season so far? Chip.
I'd have to say Sam Darnold in Minnesota. I mean, who saw that coming? I certainly didn't. And then a close second behind Sam Darnold has to be what Jaden Daniels is doing in Washington. I mean, come on. I mean, not only. I mean, with that franchise, do you know how hard it is to play quarterback for the Washington Commanders? I mean, so I think between those two things is just, I mean, it's just insane. Biggest disappointment, I think, has to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. What a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. James.
I was gonna say my biggest surprise is how bad Jacksonville is, because obviously, I mean, we get it. We know I'm excited about it. Sam Darnold's been great, but Jacksonville being 1-5 and just beating a terrible team is beyond me. I don't know. It's very clear Trevor Lawrence isn't the guy, and they made a massive mistake with that money.
Yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence
Which is
may
a
be
shame.
one of those that we talked about earlier that needs a change of scenery.
100%.
He's had a little. All right, mine. Look, we all agree on Jacksonville, so that's a given. I think the Jacksonville just demise. But I'm gonna bring one that we've not talked about. We don't talk about much at all. My big surprise for the year, and will get worse in my opinion, is the Dallas Cowboys. I don't think anybody would have put them at 3-3 at this point in the year and look as bad as they look.
In their losses, they look real bad.
The loss to Detroit was terrible, and they just can't go back.
They
I
picked-
did hear Stephen A. make the best analogy of Jerry Jones I've ever heard. You know what? Everybody says, why isn't Jerry making any moves? And Chip, you and I see this in politics a lot. He is friends, and he's personable, and he has relation. He's an owner that has relation. And it's what Stephen A. was saying. He's an owner that has relationships with the coaches and the players more than just I own you. It says I know who you are, I know you, and he has a hard time getting rid of people. The easiest thing to do is fire somebody you don't know. The hardest thing in the world to do is fire somebody you know.
Yeah, but he takes forever to But bringing someone in, like you couldn't bring. I'm sorry, the Derrick Henry thing is inexcusable.
If they'll break 500. I don't think they make the playoffs, and then the real heat will turn up in Dallas this fall.
Yeah, Derrick Henry thing is inexcusable. That's all I'm saying.
They're past. All right, folks, that's it for the podcast today. We're glad to have you again. We're doing weekly right now for a little while. We'll maybe get back into it after the election. We got a lot of stuff going on. Website is still working and running, so if you still need to get me, you can still hit the email button there on DougCollinsPodcast.com. We will be working to get that even more updated here in the future. So keep with it, keep listening, share this wherever you find it, share it, let people know that we're still going. We'll see you next time.